Welcome. Welcome, everybody. A very good evening to you all here in this beautiful, beautiful building, Blue City in Rotterdam. I hope you're all comfortable for this fourth edition of the Biodesign Night. The fourth edition, the last one was 2 years ago, so we had to wait for a while, but I think it's going to be worth the waiting because we have a fully packed program. And in this program, we will investigate all the can and the cannots and the do's and the don'ts of biodesign. I don't think I have to explain biodesign. It's been around for some 20,000 years since we started agriculture, some say. Others say biodesign is a new field where with design, science and artistic research, new ways of production, new materials are being developed. And that's where we're going to dive into head first. Also, welcome to the people at home who probably, I hope they also have like a green cocktail that all the guests here are enjoying. If you have a question during the evening, there will be presentations. Please raise your hand and I will ask you to come to the mic and then you can ask your question. And remember your question because the time for the questions will be after each presentation. So if you got a question, keep it in your mind. If you forget it, it wasn't probably very important. And if you do remember, I'll show you and you can ask your question at the mic. For the people at home, if you have a question, you know how to type it and I will read it there from the iPad and I will ask the question for you. Last household question I have, please, the telephone. Shut off the sound, keep them on. Twitter, Facebook, tweet, Insta. Let the world know what's being said here tonight in Blue City. My name is Jeroen Junte. I will be the host of the evening. Well, not really the host, because that, of course, is Blue City, but I will be the moderator who will guide everything in good lines. But that's all of minor importance. The main character, the main player tonight is biodesign. And we will investigate biodesign with a full program I told you already. Let me run you through the names. I'm going to read them because it is quite a list. We'll start off with a short introduction of Blue City. I think most of the audience might or might not remember that it used to be a playground here, a swimming pool, a playground. Actually, it still is a playground. There's even a wet lab downstairs. But what exactly happens here will be introduced by Benedict. She's the director of Blue City. After that, there will be a keynote lecture by Mauricio Montalte, and he has been in the biodesign game for more than 10 years. So he knows what he's talking about. He has been experimenting and playing around for 10 years. He will give the keynote. After that, I will introduce two people who will be sitting with me and Mauricio there on the chairs. And we will have a debate later on. And of course, you're cordially invited to mingle in the debate on some issues concerning biodesign. How can we make it bigger? How can we make it stronger? How can we make sure that biodesign also has impact? And it's not only about artistic research, which is also important, but maybe how can we have an impact and what are the consequences of that? And before we start the debate, there are three more pitches of Emma van der Leest, who founded the Blue City Lab in 2016. There will be a presentation by Shahar Livne. She's also quite some years already in the biodesign. She graduated from Design Academy. She was voted Design Talent of the Year by Design.com. So we're very proud to have her here as well. And also Anna Sidnikova. She's from Studio Samira Boon in Amsterdam. And they have developed, or they are developing, Kombutex, which is a new organic material. This is going to be the setup, and this is going to within 2 hours. That's the maximum of time, and that's going to be the big challenge with a program as full as this, and maybe all the questions that you have. How are we going to do this before 10? I promise you, at 10 o'clock, we finally can have a drink there in the end, and as always, sometimes even the most smartest remarks are made afterwards at the bar. But we're not there yet. For starters, I'd like to introduce here on the stage Nienke Benedict, the director of Blue City. And yes, please, can I have a big hand?
Thanks, Jeroen. And as this is an ecosystem of entrepreneurs, there are a lot of directors. I wouldn't call myself a director of Blue City, but I'm honored to be running the lab downstairs. Welcome everyone in this offline event since 2 years. I'm so grateful to see you all. For also the online participants, welcome. Blue City is a hub for circular entrepreneurship. We are founded almost 6 years ago to give a structural answer to the pressing questions of today. And now it's more than 50 entrepreneurs who form this ecosystem. Last year, the first circular built biolab in the world opened its doors. We have 4 spaces for pioneers in biosolutions to start experimenting with the concept they have in mind. And that's where the topic of tonight comes from, because many of them are struggling or asking themselves, and not only the members in our lab, but also in our community, how genetic modification fits in a circular economy. And I tried to prepare a very smart elaboration on this, but I didn't manage because I cannot get my head around it. I think many of us are dreaming about a regenerative economy, and oftentimes entrepreneurship is seen as a circular entrepreneurship, or biocircular entrepreneurship is seen as a strong positive force towards that regenerative society, and how to fit in the tweaking of organisms. It's a challenging topic, and I think because it's so hard to envision and to get all the perspectives right, it's important to talk about it. And that's why I think it's an honor to have you here for a constructive conversation. And I'm looking forward to learn a lot and to connect with you all. Before I give the floor back to Jeroen, I would like to thank the speakers and the team and the partners, the Creative Fund NL, and Municipality of Rotterdam for making this happen. And of course, the pioneers in our lab for being part of our creating this regenerative economy by doing it, because that's, I think, so oftentimes overlooked. Okay, thanks. And enjoy.
Thank you, Nienke. Thank you so much also for the good work downstairs and here in the building. I mentioned him, Mauricio Montalte. He graduated 2010 at Design Academy in Eindhoven. Then he started Officina Corpus Coli. Is my pronunciation? Yeah, perfect, perfetto. With that moniker, he has been experimenting on all levels of biodesign. His focus is mostly on fungus and mycelium. You even worked with ESA, space organization, so he's taking biodesign out of this atmosphere, and he will guide us through his practice and some of the concerns that he has within his field in the experimentation. Can I please have a very, very warm welcome for Mauricio Montalte, our keynote speaker.
Oh, wow, what an introduction. No pressure. Thank you so much, Jeroen, for this wonderful introduction. Let me see if you guys see what is on screen. I hope so. So I won't go much longer in introducing myself. Well, first of all, good evening, everybody, and thanks for being here tonight. It's a big pleasure for me to be here to share reflections with you and to discuss about what it means to actively engage with the design practice that involves other than human agents, such as microbial systems. And this evening, rather than going through a more traditional presentation on biofabrication principles or mycelium materials, specifically looking at technical issues and so on and so forth, I would like to try and conduct you through a short journey that is pivoting around some interconnected notions and values that strongly relate to the biodesign practice. And rather than by using visuals in a first instance, I will start such journey by means of keywords that I would like us to focus on and internalize for then later bringing them back to the discussion. So towards the end of the presentation, I will also try to further exemplify some of those discussed notions and the overall reflections through some actual works and projects that are conducted both in the creative context as part of my studio work and in industry as part of my more entrepreneurial work. Now, biodesign. There's many definitions out there. Though when we are trying to define really what the biodesign practice is about, we could relate it to, you could say, the opportunity of employing, not using, employing the intelligence and the skillful action of living systems such as fungi, bacteria, algae, mammal cells, and so on and so forth, for the creation of responsible solutions that can favor a positive reconnection with the cycles of the larger ecosystem. However, tonight, provocatively enough, I would like to attempt considering another possible way to refer to the practice, such as, for instance, I will try to call it nature co-design. And I define nature co-design, it is a definition that exists out there and talks also about the convergence between biology and human-developed technology. However, I would like to look at this as the possibility of actively collaborating with natural living systems in a thoroughly, let me say, respectful and non-exploitative manner. So beyond the utilitarian purposes only that mostly often drive us designers because we are driven by the wish of making things. Instead, I would like to think about how we could target also effective symbiotic entanglements among the humans and the non-humans, so our co-workers, our microbial co-workers, that must be respected as such and not just utilized as tools. So let's try to analyze maybe this definition, this possible definition, and let's start from the word design. And we do know that, well, still many think that, out in the world think that design is something that mostly can be secluded to exclusively formal and stylistic aesthetical exercises. Now, we know very well, I'm sure you're all well aware about it, that the design practice serves as a pivotal driving force for society. And it's useful for investigating and seeding ideas that, and different methods that could allow for positive advancements and for enabling, ultimately, social and environmental justice. Therefore, turning the present uncomfortable times we live in, that are, as we know, are rather problematic, into a thoroughly responsible future. And luckily, there's plenty of practitioners here in the Netherlands, certainly here at Blue City, but also increasingly on a global scale that look at the design practice and work in the design practice in this direction. But then if we think about the co-design part, now what is co? Let's focus 1 second on the meaning of this suffix, co. Co clearly stands for collaboration. And the idea of collaboration embraces the idea of other, and therefore of inclusivity. As in fact, I think it is urgently needed to thoroughly reflect about what it truly means to be inclusive, to include. Because it is undeniable that we live in a time of major separation, separation from the fellow humans, separation from nature, and separation from the very many agents that participate in the continuous becoming of nature. And we should finally realize that if we humans are just one agent, well, we are one within a multitude, a plurality of agents. And we must encounter and we must collaborate with others, whatever the others are, in order to move forward and effectively tackle the disgraceful implications that derive from our rather selfish behavior and from the overall way we live that is not serving neither us nor the planet. So, again, if we come to the first part of the definition, nature, it is extremely important also to decipher the relational and transitional qualities of what we define, what we call nature. Nature is something that is definitely far from the idea of that nostalgic stillness beauty. Nature is something continuously morphing, something dynamically changing and morphing through the action of multiple forces, of which culture, namely we, humans, is just one force. And certainly nature and culture are not two separated entities. So this idea of nature and culture as two entirely different divided domains must be finally surpassed. In fact, as we know, culture informs nature at all times and vice versa. And this movement in which culture and nature influence each other actually takes many, many different flows and many different directions that go way beyond the circular. And this is due to the participation, once again, let's go back to the plurality of agents, the participation of the many agents that inform both domains. So ultimately, what is nature if not our home? It's our origin and it's our habitat. And how does nature evolve? Well, it does evolve through active processes of entanglement that we call symbiosis. And this is a very important word. It's the very process at the origin of life on Earth, as Lynn Margulis teaches us. And it's nothing else than the capacity of living agents of interacting and establishing partnerships with one another beyond their species, to sustain their own life and to continue the legacy through different special types of interactions. So it's exactly these types of interactions that are born from the relationship between different agents. Thanks to this interaction, it is possible to create fully resilient and regenerative systems that result from the participation of the agents involved. So again, this idea of nature in a process of becoming, and this becoming being activated by encounters and by beneficial or different types of entanglements and relationships. Well, what does this mean, this idea of becoming? It means that if we are able to embrace and understand, indeed, the profound meaning that is to be found in notions such as temporality, transitioning, and ultimately death, we introduce the opportunity for encountering what biodesign is or should truly be all about. And we are given the chance to identify how we could move forward. So, of course, now you could say now very nice words, but beyond this overall idealism, ultimately we must confront ourselves with questions such as, for instance, the ones you see here on screen. And I'm going to read one, for instance. How should we deal with the implications deriving from the adoption of processes rooted in transformation and transience? Because ultimately, this is what we often do and witness in biodesign. We try and feed microbial systems with residual compounds from other activities, and they are transformed. And we do this for creating materials and products that can resonate with the cycles of the larger ecosystem. But that means that these things are temporary. And are we capable, in fact, of letting go of our most culturally established habits, meaning embracing transitioning, embracing temporality? Because ultimately, giving up our very human passion for timeless conservation, or even for eternity in some cases, calls for, let's say, an evolution of collective thought and of collective sensitivity that appears to be rather scary and unwanted for many. And as we know, culture takes a long time to shift to a different direction compared to the status quo in which it is to be found today. And yet, it appears to me that it is precisely this that we humans seem to be in great need of today. And that is exactly what biodesign, through the agency of its many actors, the fungi, the bacteria, the algae, and so on and so forth, could strongly help inspiring and also enabling, after all. But that means that we must open up. And opening up means letting go. And it means embracing uncertainty and transitioning and cyclicity as the way forward. And the way forward is to be found in processes rooted in regeneration, effectively. So what is regeneration? There's a lot of, this has almost become a buzzword these days. Regeneration is ultimately not about mitigating harm, but it is rather about enriching, restoring, replenishing, and creating the conditions where ecosystems, economies, and any living agent, including us, but not only us, could flourish and thrive for long. And this means that, to a certain extent, thinking regeneratively is trying to think, let me say, as a fungus would do, for nature, with nature, and as nature. And I know that I am a little biased here, as in fact fungi are the kingdom that I have mostly deeply engaged with through the work that I developed along the years. But let me pass also through a more entertaining part out of keywords, where at least some visuals possibly are going to keep you following a little my speech. Again, what do fungi allow us to do? They allow us to find out that processes rooted in decomposition and cyclical transformation are key to deciphering what regeneration and rebirth are. As in fact, fungi are the great disassemblers. They are the great decomposers of the natural world. What they do is undergoing cycles of decomposition and transformation of organic and inorganic substrates, turning them back into nutrients that they feed back to the ecosystem. And interestingly enough, fungi, despite the fact that they are much closer to us humans than to plants, they have a little bit of a different strategy of feeding. So as opposed to us, where we insert the food in our bodies, fungi insert their bodies in the food, which is quite profound if you think about it. Now, what you see here on screen is, of course, a mushroom. That's just the more beautiful morphological manifestation of a much larger organism. That is the fruit of a much larger organism. That is, in fact, the fungus, being it the mycelium. What you see in this picture is in the central part a section of a plant fiber, it's a straw fiber, within transformation. So this idea of reactualizing a very ancient practice such as agriculture and bringing it back to the fruition of contemporary times for the production of goods, materials, and products. But also the idea of growth as a metaphor for transformation, for change, for the change that design must bring about. And growing ultimately means caring. As in fact, no matter if you're operating within a lab, a studio, an industry, a cultural sector, generally speaking, there is a lack of understanding about what are the implications of dealing with the living, particularly when working with musea, with galleries. Nowadays, everybody wants to work with the living, but very often there is lack of infrastructure, the lack of expertise, and lack of capacity to embrace uncertainty as an opportunity for learning. Because caring means also observing, means understanding, means nurturing, and means accepting the agency and the autonomy of the agent that we are dealing with. So it's important to also, I think, when working with the other than human partner that you engage with, to establish a way to communicate with such agent, beyond the verbal, of course. And this, of course, cannot be done just molecularly, as we understand that communication happens among microbes, but perhaps can happen through connection and empathy. And I will quickly need to wrap it up because we do not have a lot of time, and it's important to be sharp tonight as there's plenty ongoing in the program. But I would just like to scroll through some images also that show you what the encounter with the microbial systems and the processes they promote can bring about. And these are just relatively old projects that, though bring about a certain type of language that is reflected in the outcome, that speaks about the very process that these artifacts derive from, a process rooted in transformation, an organic process, a process that offers also new opportunities from a manufacturing point of view. And I'll just keep very quickly, because I'm really coming to the end of my time, if not to reflect, and I'll leave it on to this video, that it is fundamental, therefore, to also try and release ourselves from typical forms of control when working with the other than human, of control and ruthless domestication. And it's important to root ourselves in a collaborative process driven by the desire of generating collective encounters that allow us to gather the opportunity of experiencing what designing for and with human and non-human alike entails. And there would be much more to say, but I'm sure we'll be exploring more notions as part of our conversations in a few minutes. Thank you so much for your attention.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Mauricio. Thank you so much. I thought it was a beautiful presentation, because it was not so much about the products, but it was more about the approach that you have. Let me see if there are questions from... nope, there are no questions online. Anybody in the room? Do you have a question? We're saving it up for later. Yeah, you have a question, Nienke? Please come to the mic. That's the head of the Blue City, so this is going to be a tough question, probably. Yes, Nienke.
Mauricio, how do you feel about genetic modifying your non-human partners?
I'm neither pro nor cons. I think it's a very large subject that cannot be just exploded in a short, brief answer. But we've been genetically modifying organisms and nature for a long time, certainly through more, let's say, less targeted techniques than what we can do today. Now, for me, when it comes to GMOs, the question is not about should we use these technologies or not. The point is, how should we use these technologies? These technologies exist and provide plenty of opportunities for developments and for positive impact in healthcare, in food, in material development, and so on and so forth. The point is how fundamental it should be to discuss these notions, and particularly the ethics related also to the adoption of genetically modified organism, as part of the global discourse, and bringing the discourse out of the high floors where it's usually released, where involving rather policymakers or the scientific community, and being able to offer it to the larger public, but by making the larger public informed about what GMO is all about as a technique, as a tool. So it's the old question about the tool. Imagine having a hammer. How do you want to use it? Do you want to use it for building a house, or do you want to use it to crush somebody's head? And this is ultimately the question that we should be asking, regulating how to use the tool.
I hope that answers your question.
And you're also an entrepreneur, so you make a choice. Is your company at the moment using GMO?
When it comes to research, we do. So both internally and with the research we perform with partners, we do, because working with targeted GMO techniques allow us to understand plenty about the microorganisms we work with. At the same time, we do not, for the time being, when it comes to actually our commercial offering. So there's no GMO in our products. But that's also part of a much larger conversation that also takes into account, of course, the sensitivity of the public and the possibility for a public to accept or not a certain type of material or product derived from a certain type of organism that has been modified, formally speaking, defined as GMO. Yeah.
I think the last word about GMO is not being said tonight, so we'll come back to that later on. There's another question. Yes, please, come to the mic. Yes.
Thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. I'm Susanne Weijers from the Dutch National Institute for Public Health and the Environment. And it was very inspirational. You're talking basically about systemic change, which I think everyone can relate to. So I wonder, like, what would that mean in practice? So if you would be the Prime Minister from the Netherlands or from Italy, what would be the first thing in practice that you would change to achieve this systemic change?
Well, certainly I would start from the base ground, and the base ground is the earth. There is a major contradiction in all projects that I am also involved in, and projects that most of biodesigners or practitioners or pioneers these days deal with, which mostly often rely on the great availability of residual streams of resources from some other value chains, such as the agro-industry, the manufacturing industry, and so on. Well, that's great that we try to do something with these materials. There is a problem. Mostly often these materials derive from major monocultures. And this is where the change needs to happen. This is the start of the problem. This is where we need to really work towards the establishment of a truthful biodiversity within the earth that allows us eventually also to diversify all the processes that we are so much committed to. But to a certain extent, and I make this as a critic to myself, I think we are all biased in thinking about solving a problem of, just taking up some resource and turning it or low-value resource and turning it into value, when actually the problem is that low-value resource in that kind of specific connotation and DNA and typology exists because it should be a great multiplicity of different resources. And I think that this is the start for activating true processes of regeneration in society and in nature.
Wow. We're not even half an hour in the program and things are already heated in debate. Let me remind you, there will be a panel discussion later on. So I see two other people standing there. I'm going to ask you to think about your question, keep it in mind, and I'll come back later on because otherwise we don't have any time. And there are 3 more presentations coming up. And of course, there will be a big panel discussion here. So stick to your question. You'll be the first to ask your question later on. Like I said, there will be a debate after the 3 presentations. The debate will be with 2 other guests, and I'd like to invite to the stage Ira van Aevm. Yes, can I have please a big hand for Ira? Ira is the founder of Kind Earth Tech. It's a non-profit organization. Ira, please. Yeah, you already found your seat, Mauricio, very well. Very good. Yes, please sit down, take the mic. Can you explain a little bit what the Kind Earth Tech is about?
Yes. Kind Earth Tech is an organization that came about because I've been around cultivated meat, an idea of my father, since 1980. And I met an amazing amount of people around that. And one of my best friends is Olivia Fox-Cabaan, who's very known for the industry maps around everything that's happening alternative proteins. And we thought we needed a platform to create knowledge, interaction between people that are trying to do tech in the most kindest way for our planet. And that's what we do. We organize events like these. We organize fun, and we create knowledge around it, and we support people. And that's one of the things I do.
Okay.
And I also advocate for cultivated meat at large.
You mentioned your father. Can you elaborate a little bit on your father for the people who might not know?
Yeah. Well, I'm mostly known as the daughter of. And my father's name is Willem van Aevm. And he started explaining to me when I was 14, and that was in 1980, that it would be a much better idea to create meat directly from cells and not use the whole animal. So let's say biodesign. And I was 14 at the time. It's a long time ago now. It's a huge hype, cultivated meat. And I've been trying to explain what cultivated meat is since I was 14, and I still do that.
Great. We'll be back with you later on in the panel. Also, I'd like to invite on stage now Petra Hogevorst. And she, yes, please, big applause. Petra is connected to the Dutch Institute of Public Health and Safety. And for the Dutch audience, we all know it as the RIVM. And the RIVM has become a household name in the Netherlands since a year now, and we all know the great work that you do on the COVID. It's on. Okay. The technicians, they're on it. Your mic is on. We all know, of course, the RIVM because of the pandemic. But what does the RIVM has to deal with biodesign?
Okay, so first of all, it's the National Institute for Public Health and the Environment. So I work on the environment part of the RIVM. RIVM is also working on the transition to a circular and bioeconomy. And we're trying to feed the transition with factual and scientific information about health, safety and sustainability. And as my colleague Suzanne, who just posed the question already, said, to achieve this transition, we need systematic changes. But when you want to change the system, you have to make sure that you don't make any decisions that you will regret later. So it's very important to take safety, sustainability and health into account in this transition. So this is what we're trying to work on.
Okay, so the safety, some sort of weird way I made it up in my mind. That's something that's stuck with the RIVM. It's my fault. All of a sudden it's only connected to safety, but it's, of course, it is the environment. But that's where you step in to see whether or not, what are sort of the boundaries on a safety and also technological side of biodesign, to put it very bluntly.
Yeah.
All right, great. So these are the experts. Of course, everybody's an expert, but these are the experts that are on stage tonight. And later on, I will have a panel discussion with them. And of course, with you. There are at least 2 people already have a question. You're first in line later on. And if you have a question, raise your hand and I will guide you to the mic. But first, there's another presentation. And of course, Emma van der Leest. I don't think she needs an introduction. It's a home game for you. You started here, the Blue City Lab, in 2016. You have your own department now, I think, at Willem de Kooning Academy here in Rotterdam. Again, it's a home game for you. She also teaches at the Koninklijke Academie, the Royal Academy of Art in The Hague. And she does all sorts of things. We might know her of the Microbial vending machine. She's been on the scene in biodesign in the Netherlands for many, many years. And I'd like you to give a big, big hand for Emma van der Leest. What's the step? What's the step? It's a hard one. Yes, all right. Enjoy.
So, thank you all for being here. It's actually really excited because last year we had an online version of Biodesign Night, and I'm very happy to welcome you all back in the pool. And tonight we will talk about maybe the good, the bad, and the future. It's maybe a bit of a corny title, but this topic I'm thinking about for a long time. I get a lot of questions about this. So in this presentation, I would like to give you a glimpse of the facts, a bit of opportunity from a designer's perspective. And I first want to show you this pyramid. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. It's the Pyramid of Technology, and it's actually from Kurt van Mansford from Next Nature Network. And what I find interesting about this Pyramid of Technology, that everything we use every day in our lives has a place in this pyramid. Almost everything we use, because there are different levels, actually 7 levels, and at the top you have the naturalized level that is part of our human nature. And at the bottom you see the envisioned level. That's actually technology that only exists as an idea, for example, traveling through time. That might be something that we will do in 50 years, I don't know. The topic of tonight, genetic modified organisms or genetic interventions maybe, is something that will fit somewhere in this pyramid. It's something to think about. Actually, 2 of the things I will show you next are part of this technological pyramid. Actually, cooking, something that we do every day, is also a technology. But also agriculture. Oh, thank you. Sorry. And actually, 95% of the agricultural fields worldwide that contain genetically modified crops are used for animal feed. And its use of this hands farmers over to Monsanto. Well, that's not a topic I'm diving into, but it's just interesting to see how we use technology and how technology evolved in agriculture, for example. There are lots of questions and debate around the topic, but we also see that this can save, for example, crops. You might know the story about the real banana, but actually the papaya was one of the first crops that was saved by using genetically modified organisms. So in Hawaii, where the papaya is growing, the ring spot virus almost wiped out this crop, and scientists basically saved it by using this technology. But actually, do we need genetic modification or genetic interventions to survive? And who will survive? Is it humanity or is it biodiversity, or can it go hand in hand? In my work, I like to explore the field of biodesign, the use of organisms, and actually my future vision for Rotterdam and maybe for the rest of the world is that we grow and ferment and all sorts of products like you see here on this slide in the harbor of Rotterdam. That's a big dream, but it's actually coming more and more close by. And for example, with the lab, I hope to inspire you as a designer, you as an entrepreneur, and as an investor to see what we can do and how we can work in symbiosis together to see how we can transition from an oil-based economy to a bio-based economy. A little bit of introduction. So I call myself a biodesigner. That's something I also debate lately. But I am trained as a product designer, and currently I'm working on several projects. I'm actually not teaching in The Hague, but I do teach here very proudly on my old academy, the Willem de Kooning Academy, where I'm also developing education around the fields of biodesign and circular economy. And I'm also the very proud founder of the lab downstairs, which actually came from a kind of frustration, willing to work in a lab but getting no access to labs. I thought, why not start one myself? But you can't do it without a lot of good people like Nink and many others over here. So hopefully you will get to see it soon. I'm also working on the Floriade. Maybe you know the Floriade, the biggest cultural event in the Netherlands. So please visit the pavilion, because some of the pioneers surrounded here tonight will be part of it. Actually, in my work, one of the projects that might describe this field is the microbial vending machine. Actually, I asked myself, what if we can collect valuable organisms from the wall? Because as you can see, it's a vending machine, a Febo snack automaat, in order to grow high-quality consumer products. So this machine contains 21 products, 3 of them speculative, that people can purchase, hopefully, in 10 years. Because some of the products are already in a state of production, and some of them are still in the research phase. And this is actually a storytelling project, because I really want to show people that this is not fiction. It's really something we can do, and that we have to do. So from makeup to drinks to building blocks to lamps, everything you can find in this machine. So take a look around you in 10 years on the street. So actually, there was also a menu of what you can find in the vending machine. And yeah, it's actually like a snack bar. So I'm very hopefully see this in our streets soon. And actually, by making organisms more accessible to a wider public of independent researchers, institutes, and designers, we are able to discover its properties and apply them in a wide variety of products. Working open source is also another conversation that we see often in this field. And I really do think we have to open up some of the fields to speed certain economies. I will skip, well, actually, this was a commercial, but you can find it online, of course. Another project, because I'm almost out of time, is the funky supercoating. And the funky supercoating is a speculative brand identity for a product I worked on, or started working on more than a year ago. And actually, after winning the Bio Art and Design Award, I got to know 2 professors from the Radboud University. Sorry, I will speed up. Because there was a dream to develop a coating, 100% natural coating derived from a fungus. Because working on biomaterials, coating, whether it's color or water repellency, is a very difficult thing. And actually the fungus, well, Mauricio knows all about it, can do something like this. And in 3 months' time, we had to, or I wanted to develop this, which is, of course, very, how do you say that, optimistic. Oh, I don't know what's happening. It's going, okay, I don't know. But actually, the question that I asked myself during this project as well, we have this fungus that can create a coating. We can grow it in symbiosis with the material. But actually, would it be helpful if I could speed up this process? And I think in that way, we can transfer specific properties from fungi that grow really fast and have this coating into another organism that could actually, yeah, sorry, we need to stop. Yeah, to actually, sorry, I'm just a bit stressed by the time. So the question was, can we transfer the properties of a fungus that can produce a coating but grows slowly to a fungus that grows quickly using a genetic intervention? That was actually the question. I never found the answer because something happened in the world, but hopefully I can find more about it next year when I hopefully continue with this project. And for now, I want to welcome you to go to Dutch Design Week and find the beautiful works of lots of other pioneers. And this project is also there at the Klokgebouw. So I would say, let's grow the future together. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Sorry about that.
Sir, I know.
We are on a schedule. It's not my fault.
Yeah, I had to time it better.
But do repeat one more time. Where was the project to be seen at Dutch Design Week?
It's in our nature exhibition from Dutch Design Foundation in Klokgebouw.
All right, yeah. In the Klokgebouw. So the main venue, so to say.
The main venue,
of course. All right, great.
Yes.
I have a question for you, Ira. The microbial vending machine. There were lamps inside and all different sorts made from algae, from fungi. In your opinion, should there be an artificial meat product in that vending machine as well, since it was, after all, a Febo trekkast?
Yes, true.
Should there be an in vitro croquette or frikandel?
As long as you see it as real meat, yes. But we could take it one step further, and that is, right now we have meat in fridges or freezers in the supermarket, and we're so accustomed to it that we don't really understand anymore why. Why is it packaged the way it is? Well, because we can get sick of it if we don't, or it rots if we don't. Some of his mycelia gets a hold of it. But in the future, I think that it will be not cold machines in supermarket, but something like those vending machines under 37 degrees, sort of making real fresh meat that if you would lick it or touch it wouldn't make you sick. And for me, that is a really, really funny and very happy future I'm working towards. So I love her vending machine. And of course, in the future, whether that's near or not is not important. But in our future, in something where we go and feed ourselves or buy stuff, we will have machines like that with cultivated meat in it, of course.
I would highly recommend, because people are trying to pull open these tiny hatches during exhibitions because they want to buy it. They think I block.
If somebody will allow it, I will be the first one to put cultivated meat in your machine there.
Are there any questions in the audience for Emma? It's a home game, so everybody knows already. I've one last question for you. You opened the lab downstairs, and you sort of rushed over it like it was everyday business, but it must have been, quite an effort. What was, in hindsight, not before you started, but in hindsight, what was like the biggest barrier you had to take in realizing the lab?
Well, I think there were a few.
Oh, the biggest.
Well, the building in itself is complex. So this used to be the old changing rooms. Lots of pillars, damp, dark. But besides that, also talking about an open laboratory does ring a lot of bells in different institutes, because people are like, but it's open, so what can you grow there? And what if it escapes, for example? So it's very important to talk like the Aevm, the DSMR, like the environmental services, to show them what is happening and why it's happening and why we need those labs and why we need those pioneers. So that took a lot of time, but of course it's very valuable, because when you pave the way, you also pave the way for others.
Okay, so you work open source to a certain level?
To a certain level, of course, because some are developing real products and we still have to cope with some DNAs sometimes. But if we can share it, it's of course we'd like to do it. And also, being a lab in terms of content, but also in literally a blueprint for other laboratories in the Netherlands or abroad.
Okay. So you were in contact with the RIVM. You immediately understood my bridge. So this is one of... You were not?
Susanna, who just posed a question.
Yeah, exactly,
part of the
with
board.
your colleague. So you were involved with the RIVM while realizing the lab downstairs?
Now we are as lab, But in the very much beginning, of course, you have to start all these.
Yeah, you've got to show something first, of course. So that's where the RIVM steps in. I have a question from one of the viewers at home. Emma, do you have a favorite microbe?
Oh.
Like your best microbial, it goes on. Like your best microbial friend.
Oh my God, there are many.
But again, there can be only one. You can only have one favorite.
I don't know, because most of them are working together. So okay. I would pick my graduation one, who leads me to a nice diploma. That was the slime mold.
The slime? Did I hear that correct? Yeah, right?
The Physarum polycephalum. Yeah, it's a single-celled organism. I love it. It's funny. It's great. Yeah.
Okay, that covers it all. Thank you, Emma. Can I have a big hand for Emma and her slime? Thank you. The next presentation is Shahar Livne. She graduated in the Design Academy in 2016 or 17. She, like I said, she was last year voted Talent of the Year by Design.com, which is the main design blog, architecture and design blog in the world. That was with her project Metamorphosis. She worked with Balenciaga, one of the biggest fashion houses. She's done projects with meat and with blood, and she's done projects with plastics. She probably loves slime as well. Can I please have a big hand for Shahar? Watch the step. Yes. All right. Thank you. Enjoy.
Thank you, Jeroen, for the lovely introduction. Well, you excuse me because I'm a bit blind, even with my glasses, so I'll have to refer to my papers a bit. Yeah, so as Jeroen introduced me, I work with blood, weird materials, plastics. I'm not afraid to touch and smell. And I do call myself a conceptual material designer. So what does it mean? I need to click myself. So yeah, so I call myself a conceptual material designer. I'm also eco-philosophy enthusiast. And I'm a thinker, I'm a researcher, so all my work is very conceptual based. I'm trying to look at the whole picture. So basically, I'm kind of developing my own methodology, which is more like an holistic view about materials. So the material is always in the center. I really believe all materials are narrative-carrying mediums. So, of course, we have the basic things that we all know about materials. So we have the sensorial part of it, the cultural meaning of them, the way they're made or the way they were created. But there's also the aspect of time. So where they came to be in the far past, how they will be in the far future, but also in our time. But today I'm going to talk about the meat factory. I do have a very short time, so I'm sure I'm not going to touch all the aspects. If you have questions, of course, I'll be very happy to answer, and hopefully we can dig into some things that I couldn't touch in the presentation. I'll start by saying that I'm a vegetarian already since 2000 and I was 14, 2003. And I'm vegetarian from humanitarian reasons. I love animals. I grew up doing horse riding since I'm 6 years old. I'm still doing it. I have a very, very deep connection with animals on a weekly basis. But on the other hand, I really loved to eat meat. I'm really attracted to meat. So Ira, please be faster, because I miss the meat. It's one of my dreams to have culture meat. So this project actually started already in 2014 while I was doing my bachelor at the Design Academy, and we had a theme called the conflict of interest within the food industry. That was the theme of that semester. And as a vegetarian, which is also a meat lover, a bit of an oxymoron maybe, I went to the supermarket, to the Albert Heijn, and I saw this fridge full of meat, very, very red, beautiful, attracting pieces of dead animals, because that's what they are. But they're very attractive. And for my research, I found out that basically what we do when we do kosher, I'm from Israel, we do kosher or halal slaughtering, but also all types of other ways of slaughtering. The blood is being drained out of the animal, and then it's being added as a colorant after. So there's also other ways of coloring it, more chemical ways, more synthetic, but there's also using blood or natural pigments. So basically to fake it, so we think, oh, this is fresh meat. This is really the way it was in nature. It looks very, very tasty. I have a little bit of a warning before the next image. So, yeah, if you have a problem with this image, I'm sorry. When I was Googling to look for this image, I also had a lot of stomach problems. But basically what happens with a lot of the pieces from the meat is that some of them are being wasted. So we have a problem with a lot of, with the bones and the fat, the blood, of course, it's getting to a lot of waterways or to the soil. You have the tendons and the muscles. So a lot of parts of the animal are not being used most of the times. In a perfect slaughterhouse, of course, they try to sell as much to create extra value, but not every piece of the animal can be used or wanted to be used by us. I was inspired a lot by this book. It's called The Entire Beast, so from nose to tail. And it's about the philosophy of cooking with every little piece of the animal. So if we're already killing it, if we're already doing that, and it is something that exists, and hopefully in the future we won't have to, Ira, again, you, sorry. But it is something that exists. And also funny to know that according to numbers, even though like the whole knowledge of, we have to be vegetarian, vegan, there must be replacement meat for it, it's better for the climate change, still the consumption of meat is growing. So if we're already killing the animals, let's use the entire animal. So this is a little bit, about what we get out of this. And maybe it's important to, like a little side note, that as a conceptual material designer, I'm really, really critical about designers that take waste and use it to make something. Maybe this project seems like that's what I did, but it's very important to understand that there's a whole story behind it, that there's something. Every material, again, carries a very heavy weight behind it, a very long tail. And just taking a material and thinking, oh, what can we do with it? Can I make a bowl? Can I make a lamp out of it? Not necessarily where we want to go. So this was one of my inspirations. I'm probably going to say her name wrong. I'm sorry. Kirsten Mandertsma. Great designer. She also works a lot with materials in the holistic way, really the research way of working with materials. And she created this book that actually shows us that there's no way to be 100% vegan or to avoid animal-based materials, because we are using them for everything, from bullets, from creating bullets, to the stop mechanism of trains. So even if I say, as a person, I'm vegan, I don't want to eat meat, I'm still always in touch with animals, even without knowing. So we're really like extracting the animals. We're taking this organism, we're breaking it apart, and we're putting it back together to our own needs. Again, maybe talking about this idea of transformation or genetical modification, how we become kind of alchemists of those organisms. So we're not only molding nature to our own needs, but we're actually creating it. So I have a few questions, like in between, just points for thoughts. To quote this anthropology professor that I really like his writings about pollution, Tim Ingold, he says that waste is basically a matter out of place. So should we call it even waste? Is it waste? What is matter when we're talking about natural materials, about nature? So a little bit about the project. So basically what I did, I took those tendons, blood, fat, etc., those low-value considered materials, not skin, because skin, skin I also use, because a lot of times what we do, we use skin for, oh my God, I have a minute. We use skin to make leather, but that's a whole story. I'm not going to go into it, but I took the blood, I was able to create a pigment. Basically, in history, blood was used as a pigment, so why not use it again if it's already there? The skin, the fat of the animal, the bones, I extracted my own materials. So back then, when I didn't have a studio, my apartment smelled like a corpse. Horrible, I know, but also in the psychological way, as a designer who works with material, it really made me close to the material, because I never killed an animal. Even when I used to eat meat, I never killed my own dinner. So what happens when, as a designer, you're being confronted with the raw materials, with the raw aspect of cooking with it, with smelling it, with touching it? I created this I call it bio-leather. Again, terminology to make it easier for people. Leather is a whole different story. So it's actually, I see Jeroen already coming towards me. I'm sorry. Yeah, so I created this leather material, which is actually, I'm just going to skip a bit, was shown in a few places. It's also going to be in Dutch Design Week in the Vending Foundation as part of the Taboo Materials exhibition. It has mixed reactions. Maybe one interesting one to say is that a lot of vegetarian, vegan people, they actually reacted to it in a very positive way, because they understood my idea of let's use the entire animal, let's respect every little bit of it. And just quickly run a little. Created this shoe, a sneaker with a collaboration with a sustainable sneaker company called Natu. It's more of an art project, more of like a discussion piece in a way. Could be sold. We're selling it as a collectible. And a few questions to leave you with. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Shahar. Right on time. Perfect. Perfect timing. Before I hand out questions, let me get something straight. Would you consider your work to be more on the speculative and artistic research side?
Yes,
or is it mainly aimed at implementation and impact?
Yes, definitely. So a lot of times people ask me, do you want to be provocative because you want to be provocative? That's not my purpose. The chance that I'm working with a material that has a lot of connotations and being maybe provocative because it connects to violence, that's not necessarily what I wanted to do. The provocation is not the main thing, but it's the criticism. So also criticizing the industry of meat, criticizing us as humans using nature. So when you say speculative, I always say speculative/critical design. So
exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. So.
Yeah, there's sort of
exactly.
intertwined the speculative and the critical. Well, since it is a speculative project, I think that gives you room, Petra, from the perspective of the Institute for Health and Environment. What would be some of your concerns with this project when it would be implemented, so we get an idea of how you think and work at the RIVM?
Maybe I'll give her a bit of a direction, because I see her face a bit scared of this question. Because basically what happens, and we have a lot of meat and slaughtering in the Netherlands, it's a big polluter also for waterways and the soil, because we cannot use anything, we cannot eat everything. So for you, as somebody from maybe the environmental perspective, I don't know.
Okay, maybe a bit more philosophical. I think one of the questions that you posed in your presentation was, when something is waste, does it actually have value? And I think when we're moving towards a circular bioeconomy, waste shouldn't exist anymore, because everything should be used again, should be regenerative. And I think this is what you show in your work, that we should be able to use everything. And I think, coming back to the topic of tonight, biotechnology, microorganisms can help using biomass waste streams to actually make new value out of them. Mm. So to regenerate something that was considered as being waste to something we can actually use in our economy. And I think that's one of the things you were trying to show in your project, or is it not?
Not necessarily. as a designer, I'm not really considering myself as a circular economy designer, but I think what I try to show is that this transformation. So it could be also criticism, maybe, about this idea of circularity. Because is it possible to circular everything? Is it possible to transform something endlessly? So I think it's also something that we should consider when we're talking about the word sustainability or the word circular economy. Is it even possible to do that?
Yeah, that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah, well, we need a few days for that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we'll need some more time.
It is quite a project. It raises, we can see immediately, it raises a lot of questions. It opens a lot of boxes.
Yeah.
And,
as I said, I cannot finish everything in 8 minutes.
I most certainly wouldn't call it provocative, but it is sort of tantalizing the thoughts. There are no questions from the audience at home, no questions in the audience. That usually means that it's a very clear and understandable project. Thank you, Shahar.
Great.
Thank you. Yes, please, and big applause. And there's even more. There's a third presentation coming up. Anna Sidnikova, born in Russia. She runs her own studio in Amsterdam. She's also a project manager at Studio Samira Boon, also in Amsterdam, where she runs the investigation research into a new sort of organic material, kombutex. And it has something to do with the very stylish drink kombucha. Furthermore, she is also the curator at the Moon Gallery Foundation, and she's an elected expert in the International Astronautical Federation. So she's kind of busy. Can I please have a big welcome applause for Anna? Anna, the floor is yours. What's it? Yeah, it's a big step. All right.
Yes, I see that the computer is closed. Oh, and I don't see the slides. Should I be able to see? Oh, it's here. Okay, sorry. All right. Yes, thank you for the introduction, Jeroen. And yes, very honored to be here, a part of this Pioneer Dialogues today. I'm here on behalf of Studio Samira Boon to tell you a little bit about, or to start a discussion on how can we create interiors as ecosystems, and a little bit about the studio. We believe that textile is the future of architecture, because textiles can make architecture much more alive. They let the space transform and adapt to changing conditions and changing requirements of the users, and also reacting to the natural surrounding, like, for example, weather or changing seasons and so on. Maybe, let's see. We are really looking at ways how can we make interiors more alive, not only by using soft materials such as fabrics, but also really creating the interventions which can move and transform space more actively. So we had this research project called Hortus Bionica. It is a garden of robotic textile creatures who can react to various stimuli in space. For example, they transform in relation to proximity of the encounters, or they can react to the sounds and compensate the acoustics of the space. So we've created this kind of biomimicking installations for architecture, and we were looking what would be the next step. So, of course, we can mimic nature because we enjoy it so much, but what if we could actually bring nature in architecture so that we don't only use artificial materials in architecture, but also implement more of the nature-based materials? And that's how we arrived at thinking, yes, finding out actually that there's already a lot of nature in this man-made architecture. There are a lot of living organisms that we're not all the time aware of, as there are ubiquitous living airborne bacteria, flying around, and they affect us a lot. This is actually the most of architecture, is this air. And here you can see what kind of things can grow from an air sample that is collected by Evelyn and me, the art scientists who created this project, Aevm, and this inspired and kind of kicked off our research. So we could see that within an interior space, there are a lot of trapped, harmful for human beings bacteria that are not able to escape. Of course, our buildings have nostrils, such as windows, but it's lacking lungs, something that would really actively filtrate the air from those pollutants. And therefore, we're looking at what kind of biomaterials or biotextiles, as this is our main fascination with textiles, could serve as such lungs. So maybe they could be bio-based and also contributing to the clean air. And this is how we end up to work together with Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam at the Bio-Art Science Lab with Ralph Rez and Sandrine de Heijn, who is here today. They were already researching for a while on this interesting biofilm that grows on top of kombucha, fermented drink, as you can see on the photo. And this is quite a fascinating textile that sparks interest of many artists and designers to work with. And we were really curious, how could it become a part of architecture and become a part of interior ecosystems? So we dove into these experiments. Actually, interesting to mention that how this kombucha ended up in the lab is a kind of to contribute to the rest of the story, is that as far as I understand, somebody from the European Space Agency brought a sample of kombucha from Advanced Concept team, believing that, oh, this could be something for future and for circular interiors of the space habitats. So that's we found quite inspiring and started working from there. And of course, this bacterial cellulose on itself is not really contributing to the air quality unless it kind of could be a membrane or a filter. Therefore, we are looking at applying it as a substrate for various plants or algae that can actually actively clean the air. And we've made this kind of roadmap because it's quite a big endeavor for us. And first, of course, we talk about biomaterials today, and some of them are often used as dead biomaterials, which are not active anymore. And this is not what really interests us, because we were really looking at how could we have alive materials surround us. So first, we, in our first stage of experiments, working mainly with dormant materials, which are in a kind of sleeping phase. And then it's a higher challenge to work with really active textiles, which are still able, which are still wet and kind of, posing a lot of challenges to maintain them alive. And the third stage, which is the most exciting, when they really become a part of this kind of ecosystem within the interior. So we first just dove into the exploration and sampling and went into all kinds of research, what many artists already also did before us with kombucha, as I can imagine, into textures, natural colors, and also the most exciting part for us is, of course, plant growth, and trying to apply algae, making an ecosystem with algae. And these were, interesting textures that we discovered with just this dormant state of kombucha, and it already promises a lot. And with the natural dyes, it's also very interesting to see. And then, of course, the question comes, okay, but how can we get these things out of the lab and into the real world to become actual products, marketable things, and something that we could apply? So we try to conduct a research like life cycle analysis, and also how does it compare, could it replace things like leather or cotton or paper? And by comparison, it does so far not use any chemicals in the production process, and it fully biodegrades and doesn't use as much water. Okay, it produces some CO2. But yes, there are certain advantages compared to the different material and compared to the leather production quite a lot. So we were quite positive, but of course on this low production scale, it's really hard to compare with the upscaled industrial products. And also, of course, it's interesting to see how the consumer would perceive such a material, which is quite, well, as you could see on the picture, it looks like, especially in this wet state, is a kind of slimy raw chicken. It's not for everybody. So we were trying to discover ways how could the user really accept and start enjoying the view of it. So also, we made a kind of virtual exhibition during pandemic where we present kombutex, this is called kombucha textile, into different settings. For example, as together with a noble material such as marble, which very much visually can resemble kombutex. And our next step would be to, now we tried out making some small products or test samples with this dormant state material. We're really looking into now making it, keeping it wet and alive for future applications, and it has a certain charm to it, which we want to, we really find it inspiring to keep it that way. So that is really now in the process of research and exploration, so there is not much to share, but imagine if you would have as a part of the interior such a waterfall of spirulina falling down the alive bacterial cellulose, which can actively purify the air, and eventually make such an interior a living ecosystem in balance with humans, plants, and microorganisms. So this is our vision of the future, our dream that we try to achieve, and we would like the community at large to invite and to think along with us how could we make this happen. And we want to invite you to explore firsthand our material at the Dutch Design Week. It's not 2022, by the way, it's just in a couple of weeks. I was putting my presentation quickly together, but you can see us at the Kettle House as a part of Exploded View exhibition. And soon, in February, you can see kombucha actually finally finding its way to space, because it's a part of of a payload to fly to the International Space Station in February, stay there for a year, and be tested to radiation conditions and microgravity, and we will see how can it contribute to the future human outposts in space or even on the moon, together with the Moon Gallery. So this is our little kombutex in just 1 cubic centimeter that fits, prepared for its flight. Thank you.
Thank you. Please stay for. Stick around for some questions. Let me first go to the audience. Anybody have a question in the audience? Again, a very clear speech. If I'm correct, you grow the kombutex and you use it as sort of a canvas for other living materials,
yes.
Right? Why did you choose not to use it in itself?
Well, on itself, it doesn't really produce oxygen or actively clean the air. On itself, it can serve as a passive membrane. So we kind of started out by making certain, during COVID times, we were conceptualizing the idea of creating some kind of space dividers, which could at least kind of separate the airflow. But if we want more active interaction, then we would like to introduce plants, of course.
And do you have to select the specific plants, or just like any?
Well, we try to grow there.
Plants grow on it.
We researched what kind of plants, how can they affect the air quality, because different plants they can fight different contaminants. So based on that, on one hand, and on the other hand, it's also what can be in symbiotic relationship with the substrate. Okay.
Were you Petra, were you familiar with this technique, with this material?
No, I just talked to Anna before before we started this evening, but it's a really interesting project, yeah.
Yeah. Did you know it already, the kombucha, and that you can make sort of this membrane out of it?
Been growing quite a bit of it, both as a supplement and as a kind of health booster, as well as a material, yes, indeed.
Yeah, I know. There's like a very trendy drink.
And it can be also pretty tasty, by the way. It doesn't have to be the disgusting drink that people think they have to drink because it's just healthy. Noma teaches here, Noma Copenhagen.
Okay. Ira, did you know it already?
I know of it, and I'm very glad that we look at something and use it in a different way suddenly for the right purposes. And for me, that is very kind Earth Tech. But I know of it.
Okay. One last question. Is there a GMO involved in this project?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, in a not very strict sense, we used to work first. The project started in a former GMO lab. That's the only way it's involved so far. But in the future, it is not really a part of our interest so far because, we have quite some subjects to explore, such as upscaling for the interior scale and so on, and maybe we will arrive at that question later on. But it was our cradle, the GMO lab, so we have a kind of relation to it.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Can I please have a yes? Thank you. Big thank you for Anna. Thank you. I will join you here. Concerning the last question, I asked her if GMO was involved. Mazel tov. Whether a GMO was involved, and your project it was involved. Is it possible to be? Let me start with you, Mauricio. Is it possible to be a biodesigner and sort of not use GMOs?
Absolutely, yes. Actually, there's plenty of different individuals that nature at large, for whatever the notion of nature encompasses, and we discussed it before, provides us the opportunity to collaborate with. If I have to just give an example, and I'm just here touching upon my obsession, the Fungal Kingdom, and that's just one kingdom across quite a few others that we probably all know about. The Fungal Kingdom comprises more than estimated 5 million species of fungi, and yet among the species there's many different strains. Even within every single species there are many different individuals whose genetic quality can differ quite dramatically from one to the other. Imagine that's something I often mention. If you consider a fungus, a basidiomycete called Schizophyllum comune, it's the split gill fungus present all over the world. That's actually also a so-called bad word, workhorse of scientific research, used in scientific research in all labs in the world, where a same strain called Schizophyllum comune, say A, and Schizophyllum comune B can have a genetic difference of up to 12%. If you consider that between human Homo erectus and Homo sapiens, let's go to the sapiens, Homo sapiens and chimps, there's about 2 to 3%. That gives you a little bit of an idea of how different universes we are here talking about. So yes, there is a great diversity out there, and it is fundamental to partner with each single individual that you decide to embark on a voyage with and to thoroughly understand what are the skills of this individual. And this requires years and years, decades of dedication from the many. Nevertheless, when willing to achieve in the presumptuous human attitude that characterizes us humans, a very targeted result, of course, going down the way of making use of tools that such as technologies rooted in genetic modification, can be suitable for, again, very specific purposes. That doesn't mean that natural strains cannot perform or outperform genetically modified strains.
No. From the viewpoint of the Public Health and Environment Dutch Institute, what are a lot of people are very afraid. When GMO is mentioned, people go like, Pandora's box, big danger. I think especially since the last 2 years, we're a little bit more suspicious towards living elements coming from a lab. What do you think? How real is this fear? I mean, is it more like a psychological fear, or is it real? You know, is it really a big danger, so to say?
Well, I really like the metaphor that Mauricio used before, of the hammer. So you can use a hammer to build a house, but you can also use a hammer to hit someone on the head. And I think this is where the scientists who first started to work with genetically modified organisms also realized, wow, we have this really great tool. We have this hammer. We invented a hammer. We can build a house. But wait, this could also potentially be used for dangerous things. And this is back in the 1970s when researchers themselves started the discussion on the safety of genetic modification. And since then, there's this whole regulatory system for genetic modification. It's very strictly regulated. So everyone working with genetic modified organisms in the Netherlands has to do a risk assessment, has to apply for a permit. Colleagues of mine at our Aevm working at the GMO office, they verify these risk assessments, and they either allow a permit or people have to do a notification there. So it's very
really
strictly regulated.
Yeah, I see you nodding, Ira. Is it really that strict?
Yes, of course it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is really strict, and we have legislation, and that's not really the risk factor here. It's the way you talk about it. Is there this fear? Is this really this fear? Yeah. As long as we use sentences like that, we will have to prove that it's safe. And I think we should have to, are we already this far that we know and can assess this in a proper way? And then it becomes the norm that, of course, something can be GMO and that we can trust it because it has been assessed.
Exactly.
And it's in your name here, it's biodesign. And the word design means that you plan for something.
Yeah, it's a tool. It's a very useful tool.
And we've been biodesigning ourselves. Some people mate with certain people because then they have better offspring. We do it with our dogs. We do it with our plants. It's in our nature. And to set ourselves apart from nature, that in itself is maybe very dangerous. So it's something that we've designed, we came up with, it's something we can use. And one of my questions would be to the lady working right now with the kombucha, if GMO would be a normal thing and not a threat in her product, what would be her, let's say, best possible GMO that you could work with and would make your work more easy and make it easier for people to apply your very brilliant ideas into our homes. Not in 10 years, but maybe in a couple of years. And that's what GMO can do, if we design it in the right way.
Well, let me reframe it. A hammer doesn't jump out of the toolbox by itself. But if you work with GMOs, it can happen that biodiversity, with the Monsanto was mentioned, the company, like Voldemort, whose name we don't name, that certain company, they've unleashed catastrophes because they push out natural crops and vegetation because of the GMOs. It is also something that's very hard to control, is it not?
No, I don't agree at all, actually.
Okay.
No, I mean, the example of Monsanto had nothing to do about it being a GMO. It's about the way it's being used for monocultures, using lots of herbicides, pesticides.
So GMO is not necessarily a danger to biodiversity?
Not in itself, it's a tool.
Yeah.
And of course, you have to use it wisely. But this is one of the reasons why it's strictly regulated.
Okay. I'm going to turn to the audience now. In the beginning, there were some questions too, if I remember correctly. And you still have a question? You're cordially invited to the mic. And the other one as well. Then and let me get the iPad, because there might be some questions from the viewers at home as well. I promise you to give you
your answer.
the opportunity.
But I still want her answer.
Yes, it's coming up.
So in architecture, we often face that many products need a certain chemical treatment, even you really try to make a bio-based product. But after it's done, you want to apply architecture, and there are many legislations for that. For example, it has to be fire retardant. So if this kind of aspect we don't have to put on top with a kind of harmful extra layers, and it could be included in the brewing process, that could be an interesting way to make it a bit more sustainable and meet these human imposed requirements for the building industry.
Thank you.
Stick around, Anna. I have a question of one of the viewers at home. Many people, designers, non-designers, entrepreneurs, scientists, are working with kombucha these days. Do you exchange knowledge with each other?
Yes, we do. Well, in the lab, we're not the only ones working with kombucha, so then it's quite easy to exchange. There is someone working in fashion, Isa, Avad, and of course, we're a little bit in a different area, having interest, so it's also we're not really a competitor, and it's nice to exchange the findings and offer each other some solutions.
So there is exchange, yeah.
Yeah, we try to actually promote exchange. We've now set up a website, lifetextiles.com, where we want to invite people to, share the knowledge somehow and create a database for this. But yeah, it's in the process.
Okay, I think it's answered. Yeah, please, you have a question. Yes, you were there early on this evening.
Okay, thank you. I'm Leo Wyers. I'm the uncle of Sanne, who introduced me here tonight. And I must say I'm pleasantly surprised by all the ideas and all the inspirations that I heard of tonight. Yet I have a question. When I'm thinking of plants, they live in a circular economy, so to say. Animals do. And as a consequence, only a limited number of animals can live in a certain area. When I try to imagine that humans will live in a circular economy, my question is, how many humans could live on this planet in a circular economy? Would you have any idea of the number of people that we can sustain that way? And if not, I think it's very important that we soon get an answer to this question so that we can realize the consequences of what we are working towards. That's my question.
Okay, and anyone
I think
in the panel?
I'm looking at Mauricio first.
Okay.
It's not an easy answer to a very important question, a fundamental question which actually makes us critically reflect about the multitude of the human species and our dramatic impact on the planet. If I would have to give a straightforward answer in terms of my sensitivity, I do share the belief that we might be too many. That in fact, for the greater benefit of the greater whole, call it the planet and all the organisms on it, perhaps it would be wise to just limit our expansion, provided that we have been quite not so beneficial virus on this planet so far. On the other hand, it's also very tricky to state something as strong, because of course it evokes different types of feelings that relate also to recent pasts, where of course massive elimination of individuals belonging to a specific target group were performed. So this is, of course, I mean, it's difficult to have a solution served on a silver plate. I believe we have a lot, though, that we can do with the technologies and with the ingenuity that we have been able to develop. And such ingenuity, thanks to the partnerships that we can develop and engage with through the biological world. So again, and here I really like to stress the fundamental importance to understand the need of partnering with microbial entities in order to really learn not only from their societal organization, but also from how we could interrelate as species, in between our species and with our species. I think that both on a metaphorical, philosophical, and factual level, this could really allow us to advance much better in a direction where possibly we can sustain on this planet the life of a very wide human population, if only though we take into account the great diversity that the planet absolutely needs. As finally, ultimately, we are the monoculture here. We are the Monsanto. And so we just need to perhaps let the biodiversity emerge a little bit around us, as we are immersed in a system, we are not surrounded by it.
Okay, like you said in your presentation, we have to think as a fungus would do.
Yeah.
Like you said, there's somehow they have like a collective intelligence that we as humans lack, because we are destroying the one thing that we're dependent on. I'm sorry, is not an exact number we could give you, the amount of people, and maybe that's for the good as well, but I think we all agree that a little bit less would be just as good. Does that satisfy? Okay, it's good enough for this evening. You also have a question. Thank you for your patience as well.
Yeah, hello. Thank you, everyone, for everything today. The presentations were great. My question started with Mauricio, but I'll open it up to anyone that wants to answer it. So going back to the idea that biodesign is a collaboration with nature, there's an element of respect to it. I do want to mention that there is a little bit of, you're still manipulating whatever element or organism you're working with, right? And that's not to say that you can't do that respectfully. There are cultures, indigenous cultures, that have done that with metals, with ceramics. There's a culture around it that, you know, builds some sort of respect. But I think part of what drew us away from that was consumption and just scaling everything up. So how do we prevent ourselves from falling into those bad habits again with biodesign and not turning into, whether it be with GMO or any other, you know, organism that you're working with? How do you stay away from going back into not respectfully treating this and just manipulating or exploiting these organisms?
I'd love to be able also here to give you a straightforward answer, and it's a very, very important fundamental question. Thank you for this question. It's controversial because this is, if you wish, like what I discussed before, is very much what I investigate on a studio level as part of a creative practice that critically looks at the way human society interacts with other societies. As opposed to that, I do exist in the industrial realm, where of course things get a little bit more complicated. And if there's one thing that I think makes a lot of sense in your statement, is the fact that inevitably, despite a certain type of drive and idealism, if we want to change a system, we need to work within it, and we need to change that from within. And to do that, the scopes that animate the whole practice become fully utilitarian. Utilitarian in the purpose, so you talk about, as I said before, we should not talk about exploiting microorganisms, using microbes. We should talk about employing, partnering with co-workers, and so on and so on. Well, these are all great words, if not that in the end what we do is growing this microbial cell factories, as they are defined in science, as workhorses. So we really push the best we can out of them in order to accomplish very utilitarian targets. And even worse, what is there? That I'm talking about nurturing a sincere relationship with the other than human, and and I talk about the other than human as my partner. And then once I accomplish my target, I kill my partner. Because society doesn't want my partner alive, because society is afraid of anything that can change, transform, transition, anything that is not controllable, anything that is uncertain. And this is a major problem. So I think it is to be found in a few of the things that have been discussed tonight, also before about the kombucha. On the side, the wish to adapt to the request of human culture and human society. So, for instance, in architecture, we need to comply to a certain set of rules and regulations in terms of fire safety or whatever other standards we actually need to comply to. Or the need to fundamentally start working on a fundamental shift in regard to the way we look at everything that we use every day and the way in which everything should be programmed, and that's where GMOs can really help us, for a certain type of life cycle to characterize that type of application. And finally, the most important thing is that we need to be able to give back to the system, because that's what we learn from ancestral knowledge, ultimately. The capacity to take, but also to give back, to maintain a system in good balance. We know that it's far from easy because the system is very complex. But we have such ingenuity and understanding and technologies, particularly nowadays with data-driven loop systems and so on, sensing and actuation and so on, that can enable us really even to quantify this give and take type of relationship.
About this, you say that there's sort of a fear for change. Society doesn't like a change. At the same time, there have to be regulations. I think that's a dilemma. I can imagine that Petra, you at the National Institute have to deal with. At a certain point, you see the fear of society, and you are an institute that has to deal with that fear and to calm that fear maybe, but at the same time you want to give momentum to the change.
Yeah, well, actually, I totally agree with Mauricio. We do need fundamental changes. So at the moment, how regulations work, for example, when using toxic or hazardous chemicals, there are certain limits. And you have to be below this limits, and then it's allowed. But we actually want fundamental changes. So this is why we're also working on the topic of safe and sustainable by design. So we're now trying to help designers to make this change and not think about, oh, my hazardous chemicals have to be below a certain limit. No, you have to start with using safe chemicals. You have to start with designing your product, your process safely, and also looking at sustainability. So what is the impact of the product that I'm developing, and how can it actually safely and come back into the loop and yeah. Okay. So change the system into a safe and sustainable way. Yeah, so this is a beautiful question.
Can I ask one follow-up question just to leave on maybe a brighter note? Are you all optimistic of these systematic changes based off of what we've seen today and the things that are going on at Blue City? Do you think this is possible in the near future? Or, are you optimistic or pessimistic about that?
Okay. Could you define near future?
I'll leave that open to you in your lifetime.
I'm a very optimistic person, so I definitely see opportunities, but I also realize we're just at the start. So we're still all looking at how are we going to change this system. Nobody really has the endpoints clear. So it's just small steps, hopefully, towards a better future. But yeah.
We've raised some. So yes, Ira, please. No. I was going to you, but please. No.
I'm the old lady in the room, so and I'm still the daughter of. So my story started in 1980. First person talking about cultivated meat was a guy from France, actually. I don't know whether you know that. It was in 1986. And if I look at the current rate of this technique going forth, which can do a lot of good if we do it right, and that's the point. We have to do it right and with respect to everybody. And I was looking at numbers, and probably right now in 2050, it is possible that 10 to 20% might be cultivated meat. Okay. I'm probably going to order my coffin at that time. So I'm still here. And I'm still doing this because I think I'm working towards a cathedral. And in the medieval times, many generations worked towards something beautiful and something important to them. And I think if we look at this it has to be done in 5 years or 10 years, and then I'm talking to the investors here in the room and everybody listening. You can't expect this to be in 5 years or 10 years. Give us time to do it right. And then we will build you the best possible, safe, beautiful, cooperative cathedral, and that is what I think is possible. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I really like that.
Long answer, sorry.
Yeah, no, I liked it a lot.
No, patience.
Yeah.
That's the message. I was going to go to you anyways, and it sort of follows up on what you're saying. Tonight we've seen a lot of projects were speculative. They were not directly on the implementation. Of course, Mauricio, you have your own startup now, Mogul.
Didn't show it much though.
Sorry?
I didn't show that much tonight. Yeah.
No, you didn't show it, but you have your own startup and you already provide floor tiles and I think also acoustic tiles and with mycelium.
And keep tuned in because more is to come very soon.
And more is to come. Patience, again. I see a thread through the evening. But I find it interesting where this point comes from, and I'm looking basically at either one of you, is where this speculative, when is the speculative all of a sudden like, okay, this can happen? And what are the sort of side conditions that are necessary to make something from speculative go into something real? I mean, the in vitro also started speculative.
No, it wasn't speculative at all. It was, at the time, in full use for medical reasons. But at the time, in 1980, there was not a doctor willing to make a steak. He was still building a heart valve or skin. So his focus was on something very different. And that focus was nurtured by a lot of money and a lot of prestige and his career. So they found my father very charming and they wanted to have nice conversations with the guy. And then they said, bye. And they were afraid to talk with their colleagues about it because that would actually have ruined their careers. We could have put them in the loony bin. So it is focus and it is co-creation and it is taking the ideas of unlikely people very seriously and hoping that, for instance, his realm of mycelia and also the huge realm of algae, put it in AI, let's find out what's already there, then we don't need to use the tool GMO for that. We can find out what's going on, what we have already on this planet. But on the other hand, if we have a tool that can be used for something that we need, don't discard it. Yes, it's speculative, cultivated meat, but it is proven already that we can make it. It's just, can we put enough effort, focus, and maintain the work into it, and then it will happen. And if anybody wants to come with me to Singapore, we can even order it and taste it and eat it. And that's why I call myself a nexitarian, because I also eat cultivated meat.
Okay.
So it's not speculative at all.
No, but okay, but many years ago, it's sort of, the idea of, how can we grow meat? It must have started with sort of a speculative thought, way before there were growing tissues or heart valves.
Yeah, but I think there is a sort of instinctive knowing that you also have to take into account. All our brain functions, so not only the specific scientific one that needs to be proven and then it's proven, then it's right, but you have instinctive knowing. So this can be done. I think if we make this work and that work and put it all together, then this is possible. And yeah, that we call this speculative, but I think a lot of what we do today is very speculative and it has shown to be truth. So take the speculative into account, listen to the weirdos around you, and that will probably be our future.
Okay. Start listening to the weirdos. Have patience. As you can guess already, I'm trying to wrap it up because the time is up. I think some really serious issues have been brought forward. And I think also very interesting insights have been given. For example, we can laugh at it like have patience and take the weirdness, take it seriously. But there's actually a deep truth in it. And what I find interesting in this evening, and it started immediately off with the discussion on GMO, is that apart from patience, it also requires bold steps and maybe taking the leap of faith into biodesign. We're not there yet with reaching the full potential of biodesign, but I do think, and I hope, and I'm asking actually to the panel, what do you think within the next, I have to pinpoint it at least to some time effort, but that we see more of impact and results of biodesign in real life?
I think we're already starting to see some results actually now. There are so many startups in the Netherlands with great ideas working towards this bioeconomy. So I think we're already starting to see the first results, but working with nature takes time. So yeah.
Okay, it takes time, and time is at least what we don't have anymore tonight. Well, not here on stage. We have some time. Of course, we haven't seen each other for well, we might have, but not in a setting like this for more than 1.5 years. So before we go to the bar and we start exchanging other thoughts and other knowledge, I would like you to once again give a big applause. First of all, for Nienke Benedict, who's sort of the host here tonight with Blue City. Also, for the 3 pioneers who gave a wonderful presentation here tonight. Emma van der Leest, of course, the founder of the Blue City Lab. Anna Sidnikova of the Combutex. And Shahar, who already had to leave because she lives in Eindhoven, which was so we're going to miss her at the drinks. Also, Shahar, a big round of applause, please. Yes, also, yep. And finally, of course, for the people in the panel here, Petra, Ira, Mauricio, thank you so much. And thank you, of course, for all your questions and your positive input. And we're going to see you at the next Biodesign Night. Thank you so much.